Hey guys, I'm super excited about this one. Today I'm going to be reviewing my desert island whiskey, Talisker Port Ruighe from the Isle of Skye. Hey guys, I'm Nath Martyn, the Whisky Scribe. I'm a whiskey enthusiast and I love all things whiskey. But taste is subjective, and there's a lot of whiskies out there and a lot of different ways to enjoy them. So whether you're a seasoned connoisseur or you just want to learn more about whiskey, let's explore it together. If you'd like to see more from me, please consider subscribing. I put up new videos every week. You can also follow me over on Instagram. So a desert island whiskey is pretty much exactly how it sounds. If you were stuck on a deserted island and you could only drink one whiskey for the rest of your life, what could you handle without getting sick of? So for me, my desert island whiskey is Talisker Port Ruighe. Now the Talisker distillery was founded in 1830 and it's named for the Gaelic term for the area, Talisker, which means land of the cliff. So some interesting facts about Talisker distillery. They had a couple of fires in the early 1900s and finally even in the still house. So by 1960 they had to completely rebuild the distillery, but so they could keep making the exact same spirit, they made exact replicas of their 2 wash stills and the 3 spirit stills. And that way they were able to keep on making the Talisker whiskey, which is known for being moderately smoky and have this salty essence that supposedly comes from the spray of the sea. They've changed hands a few times over the years, but they're currently owned by Diageo, who, as you probably know, they own the likes of Johnnie Walker, Cardew, Caol Ila, Dalwhinnie, and a massive portfolio of other whiskey distilleries. But enough of the flirting, let's get into it. So the Talisker Port Ruighe is a non-age statement single malt. It's 45.8%. It's been aged primarily in ex-bourbon casks and then finished in port barrels. Now, although it's been finished in port barrels and the name is Port Ruighe, it's not actually named for the barrels. It's named after the main town in Skye, which is Port Ruighe, and that comes from the Gaelic term Port of the King. And that's because when Bonnie Prince Charles was fleeing the UK after the Jacobite rising, he actually fled through the Isle of Skye. He managed to get snuck over to the island and then catch a ship out to France. Yeah. That's enough small talk. Let's get into this. So you can see it's got a real golden color with only a faint red hue. So that tells us that it probably hasn't been in the port casks too long. Those legs they're sort of moderately thick. They're sinking down slowly. So it's a nice, thick, oily whiskey. And I can't remember, but I don't think this is chill filtered. It doesn't say. This has got a beautiful nose. The first thing you get is that saltiness, that maritime salt. There's a bit of orange sweetness. Yeah, so this sweetness that sits in the background there, it's kind of a cross between orange and almost white chocolate. But just that saltiness is amazing. And if you've ever seen the Talisker distillery, the aging room where they age their barrels, there's a small road. It wouldn't even be about 3 meters wide. That's it. From the wall of the aging house to the sea, you've got like a 3 meter gap. And you can really believe that salt just comes from that sea air. That nose is just beautiful. I fall in love with this whiskey every time I try it. So that saltiness on the nose, that's still the first thing that hits your palate. But you've sort of got this very light, creamy sweetness from the port barrels that makes that a lot smoother than you would expect. And a lot of the other Talisker whiskies can be very, very abrupt with that saltiness, whereas this, it just carries across nicely. What's the Japanese word for where it's like that right combination of sweet and salty? Umami?
Umami.
Umami?
Yeah.
So the way that port is carrying across that saltiness, the best word for it is umami. That Japanese combination of sweet and salty in just the right combination. There's this very light spiciness, but it's not like that earthy spice. If anything, it's almost like a faint little bit of chili. And there's this chocolatiness. There's this chocolate flavor that sticks around in your mouth. Like the finish is, honestly, it's actually very similar to where you've just had a bite of probably not milk chocolate, but not extremely bitter dark chocolate, something sort of halfway between. And that feeling and that flavor in your mouth after you've finished the chocolate and you breathe out, that's what lingers here on your palate, which is amazing after something that's so salty at the front. The saltiness like draws back a little bit on the palate with the sweetness coming through, and then just to have that chocolate finish. No wonder I like this. I'm a chocoholic, and any whiskey that brings chocolate to the table is fantastic. All those different contrasting flavors, the way they all come together and they're just balanced so perfectly, it's almost like a fine dining experience in a glass. They're balanced so magnificently. If you were telling somebody that you had a whiskey that was both sweet and salty, it could go either way, whereas this it meets perfectly in the middle.
It's also a whiskey that you and I both like, which is rare.
Yeah. That's probably part of the reason why I like it. So there's 3 distinct flavors in here, and Talisker's always been known for salty and smoky, and you've got this really nicely balanced sweetness in there, and we know that comes from the port barrels. Now the saltiness, we know that's supposed to come from that spray of the sea and the aging room being right next to the sea. When it comes to the peat though, there's some contention around this, because although it's lightly peated, and they say that the barley is lightly peated, when you visit the distillery, they tell you that most of the peat flavour supposedly actually comes from the water running over the peat. So the water that they use, they take it from a stream that has already been running down over peat. There's a lot of contention as to whether or not that is going to have much of an effect compared to the actual peating process of the barley. But either way, it tastes good, and I don't care. So Talisker Port Ruighe is my desert island whiskey, but it hasn't always been. So originally my desert island whiskey was Talisker 10, and that's because it was the first whiskey I tried that was it was bold and it was full of flavour, and so I quickly fell in love with it. But when my wife and I got married, one of my friends knew what my favourite whiskey was, so he got a bottle of Talisker Dark Storm and gave that to us as a wedding gift. And we opened it immediately, and it just became it was the whiskey that the entire bridal party was drinking, and we loved it, and we had all these fond memories associated with it. So Talisker Dark Storm became my desert island whiskey. So that same friend decided to get married on the Isle of Skye. So we went over there for the wedding and visited the distillery, and that's where we discovered Port Ruighe. And it was this beautiful whiskey. So we bought a few bottles. It became the whiskey that everyone drank at the wedding. It also became the whiskey we would drink after a day of hiking and sightseeing. We would sit there on the shore and look out over the sea. And we have so many fond memories of it that it just became my new desert island whiskey. And it's not an expensive whiskey, it's reasonably priced. You can pick it up for about $130. So it's ideal as a whiskey that I could happily drink for the rest of my life. So on its own, this whiskey has got a great flavour profile, but when you combine it with all those happy memories in Talisker and the Isle of Skye, and the fact that my wife also loves this whiskey, how could it not become my favourite? So that's my desert island whiskey. If you have a desert island whiskey, please let me know in the comments below, especially if there's a great story or a memory attached. If you like this video, please give it a like. If you want to see more, hit the subscribe button and enjoy what's in your glass and sponge. I'm really enjoying what's in this glass. Hey guys, I'm excited about this one today. I'm going to be reviewing my desert island whiskey, Talisker Port Ruighe from the Isle of Skye, and we need to take all those things off the table because they all just rattled the second I moved. Port Ruighe, Now, taste is subjective.
Sorry.
Yeah, you don't include it when you burp. So for me, my desert island whiskey is Talisker. Itchy nose. So for me, or a story associated with it. Why do I just talk like that, okay?